It all started when the Marvel multiverse started eating itself alive. Not metaphorically. We're talking entire universes slamming into each other like blackout drunk dimensions, forgetting which reality is theirs. And these weren't cute alternate timelines waving across space like neighbors in parallel driveways. These were the incursions. Two Earths from two realities, sharing the same space at the same time, like cosmic Tinder matches with a deadly grudge. If neither planet was destroyed within 8 hours, both entire universes would blink out of existence like a bad thought. So the Illuminati intervened. Earth's brain trust, its secret chess club of world savers and future war criminals, formed a desperate committee. Doctor Strange, Reed Richards, Iron Man, Namor, Black Bolt, Professor X, Black Panther, all sitting around a table not asking for help, just deciding who gets to push the multiverse's red button first. They built world-killing bombs, hoping that by blowing one world before Baoch exploded, then the one left would be saved. Billions would die so that others would live. That was the plan. At first, they hesitated. Then universes started dropping like flies at a supernova rave. And just like that, the moral high ground got burned to cinders. They destroyed Earths to save their own, one after the other, justifying it with math, philosophy, and a 1,000-yard stare. Each incursion brought more desperation, more compromises, more nights where Tony couldn't even look at his own helmet. And through it all, the countdown ticked toward the final collision. The last incursion. Earth 616, the main Marvel universe, and Earth 1610, the Ultimate Universe, home of edgy redesigns, Miles Morales and Nick Fury with Samuel L. Jackson's face. Both realities came crashing together like two angry gods realizing they're married to the same timeline. With this coming danger, Reed Richards tried to save everyone with science. Black Panther armed himself with an infinity gauntlet and the righteous fury of a king who read too many bad endings. Namor just poured himself a drink and said something poetic and threatening. It didn't matter. Everything failed. Every plan, every plea, every last-second Hail Mary crumbled. As universes collapsed and reality turned into static, Reed reached for his family and missed. And then, nothing. Silence, white void, and the unmaking of all that was. But nothing doesn't stay empty for long. Because on the other side of obliteration, something even more unhinged was already taking shape. A stitched-together Frankenstein planet ruled by a man in white robes who decided God wasn't doing a good enough job. Dr. Doom, Molecule Man, and Doctor Strange walked straight into the multiverse's after-party and decided they were in charge now. But it all started with the Beyonders, those incomprehensible interdimensional beings who treat universes like disposable coffee cups. They were the ones behind the incursions, pulling strings, snapping timelines, tossing planets like pizza dough just to see what would happen. And they were winning. Until Doom pulled out the cosmic equivalent of an Uno reverse card dipped in dark science and blackmail. He and Molecule Man built a trap, and by trap we mean they literally took Molecule Man clones across the multiverse because all of them were like bombs connected to a master switch and launched them at the Beyonders. It was insane, it was genius, it was morally horrifying, and it worked. Doom absorbed the Beyonders' power and rewrote reality with his bare hands. Yes, you heard that right. Victor Von Doom, formerly just a guy with a metal mask and extreme parenting issues, became God Emperor Doom. White cloak, full divine smolder, voice like thunder, and the patience of a man who rules over madness with a passive-aggressive sigh. He didn't just make a new world. He made Battleworld. A Frankenstein planet stitched together from the remnants of dead realities, held together by raw god energy and unhealthy emotional repression. Each zone was a chunk of some forgotten or broken Marvel universe. There was Greenland, where Hulks were the dominant species and rage was currency. Doomstat, the capital, was literally a Gothic palace where Doom sat on a throne made of leftover story arcs. And Bar Sinister had clones of Mr. Sinister doing high fashion and high treason. But it got even more interesting. Spider Island was crawling with web slingers, and the Shield was a massive wall holding back Marvel's worst nightmares, like Marvel zombies, Ultron-infested realms, and annihilation waves that never got therapy. And then there was the Thor Corps. This was a police force made up entirely of alternate Thors from across the multiverse, each one worthy, each one thunder-charged, all serving Doom like storm-wielding mall cops in a divine dictatorship. But Doom didn't just rule, he erased memories, sculpted identities, played God with a scalpel. In Doom's dystopia, Reed Richards was presumed dead because Doom made sure nobody remembered him, and Sue Storm, the love of Reed's life, was now Doom's queen. However, Johnny Storm, her brother, was turned into the literal sun. Like, he orbits Battleworld and burns for Doom's glory, glowing with pride and pain because Doom said so. And Ben Grimm? He was not even a person anymore. He was the shield itself, a living wall made of stone holding back the darkness, all because Doom twisted his fate into a job application. And strange? He remembered everything. He played Doom's loyal sheriff and whispered warnings into the wind while quietly panicking that their god wore guilt like cologne. So Battleworld wasn't a paradise. It was therapy with a body count. A slow-motion train crash wearing elegance like a crown. But cracks are starting to form. And in those cracks, secrets slip through. Because somewhere in the shadows of Patchwork Paradise, someone remembered a little too much. And someone else was about to crash this god party with science, memory, and a really old grudge. Before Battleworld rose like a divine mood board of broken realities, there had been a plan. Not a good one, not a clean one, but a desperate, universe is melting, throw science at the apocalypse kind of plan. Reed Richards, the fantastic one himself, gathered the smartest, toughest, and most stubbornly noble people he could find. Black Panther, Captain Marvel, Star-Lord, Cyclops, a couple of backup brains, and built a lifeboat. Yes, an actual cosmic escape pod, like a space version of those inflatable rafts you never believe you'll need until you're screaming through existential fire. The plan was simple: survive the collapse of everything and figure out what comes next. Then, like bad karma in a business suit, the Cabal made their own. Thanos, Namor, Black Swan, Terrax, Maximus. Basically a supervillain group chat that turned into a doomsday project. They also built a lifeboat because of course they did. Villains survive things. It's kind of their thing. So as reality died in fire and chaos, 2 lifeboats slipped through the cracks and floated into the void like cosmic refugees. And then they crashed right into Battleworld, slammed down like awkward guests at Doom's divine housewarming party. The hero boat woke up buried under the surface in one zone, like amnesiac ants in a snow globe. The villain boat? It landed somewhere very inconvenient and very dramatic. Thanos stepped out with that look that said he wasn't here to make friends or follow the new dress code. And just to make things even weirder, Miles Morales was on the hero raft. He wasn't supposed to be there. He had snuck aboard, probably while trying to make sense of the apocalypse and also maybe just looking for a quiet corner. And yes, he brought a sandwich. This would become cosmically relevant. You'll see. As the survivors stumbled into Battleworld and slowly began to regain their memories, things got messy. Because memories were dangerous in Doom's world. Knowing what came before meant recognizing Doom for what he really was. A man who had stolen power, sculpted lies, and built a kingdom of denial on the bones of real history. And not everyone stayed quiet about it. T'Challa remembered. Reed remembered. Cyclops remembered too. And he brought the Phoenix Force with him like it was tucked in his carry-on luggage. So now you had a burning bird god, a few very angry heroes, a sandwich-wielding teenager, and Thanos, who woke up and immediately started plotting doom for the guy who thought he was Doom. And somewhere, God Emperor Doom felt the ripple. The cracks in his perfect world weren't just cosmetic anymore. They were bleeding memory, rebellion, and fire. And worse, something was coming from beneath it all. Everything looked perfect on the surface, but Battleworld was never built to last. Doom had sculpted a God-King identity out of cosmic glue and raw trauma, but beneath the white robes and glowing mask, he was still Victor Von Doom, which meant ego, fear, and a deep, burning need to be worshipped. And when your kingdom is sewn together from fragments of dead realities and trauma memories, it's only a matter of time before someone finds the seams. That someone was Valeria Richards, daughter of Reed and Sue in another timeline, now raised under Doom as his gifted child. She didn't buy the whole God Emperor act. She was smarter than that. Smarter than everyone. She saw through the flawless marble, caught glimpses of data that didn't add up, and found inconsistencies that smelled like denial, dressed in divine perfume. And the more she poked, the more the illusion coughed. Meanwhile, Reed Richards and his fellow survivors were sneaking around the cracks of Doom's utopia like mythological termites with a grudge. They split up, made alliances, and kicked hornets' nests. Cyclops used the Phoenix Force to roast anyone in the way, while Captain Marvel flew off to rally resistance in the skies. Black Panther and Namor began plotting with the kind of passive-aggressive tension that only two kings with way too much pride could manage. And then there was Doctor Strange, Doom's right hand, the sheriff of godliness. He had helped build Battleworld and had protected the secret. But when Reed Richards showed up, bruised, brilliant, and still chewing on cosmic stubbornness, Strange broke. He couldn't keep the lie going, and so he spilled everything. The truth about Doom, the secret about the lifeboats, and the shape of reality before it collapsed. And then, Strange died. Not in some honorable duel like you'd expect. He was obliterated by Doom. Just like that. Gone dust in God's hands. And the betrayal stung Doom deeper than he let on. But the cracks were now bleeding open. Thanos, who had spent the last act doing what he does best, looming, decided it was time to throw some shade. He confronted Doom, mocked his godhood, called him unworthy, and reminded everyone that true power does not beg to be worshipped. However, Doom responded the way only a megalomaniacal deity would. He ripped Thanos' skeleton out of his body. Not metaphorically, literally. 1 minute, Thanos was talking. The next, he was a pile of ashes and regret. It was one of the coldest mic drops in the history of multiversal flexes. But Doom's iron grip had slipped. Because now the Thor Corps, his divine law enforcers, started to question everything. Their faith had been built on order, but now it was cracking under the truth. Some of them rebelled, and some walked away while some turned their hammers on each other. And across Battleworld, the chaos grew. Kingdoms started rising against Doomstat. Domains long kept in check by fear or power suddenly remembered how to scream. The world was tearing itself apart, not from the outside, but from within. And through all of it, whispering through the cracks, sliding between the fibers of stitched-up reality like a worm in silk, was Molecule Man. He was not just alive, he was everywhere. His voice moved through time like a glitch in the programming. He was the key Doom had used to take power from the Beyonders. But he had not been tamed. He was not loyal, he was hungry, and he whispered truths to Reed. He made jokes that carried galaxies in their punchlines. And he always watched. Because Molecule Man knew what came next. Battleworld was collapsing. Not in fire or in war, but in truth. Truth was the one thing Doom's perfection could not survive, and Reed was uncovering everything. Everything led to this. 2 men, 1 room, no gods left to hide behind. Inside the molten, bizarre reality space where Molecule Man nested. Because apparently, when you eat the Beyonder's power, you get to build a private cosmic man cave under existence. Reed Richards and Victor Von Doom came face to face. Not just as rivals, not just as broken geniuses from a dead multiverse, but as 2 exhausted fathers, 2 architects of what came before and what would come after, now standing in front of the weirdest referee in comic book history. Molecule Man didn't blink. He waited, and the tension in that room was so thick it could collapse dimensions. Doom looked like a god, still clad in the white armor of his divinity, the mask that had screamed dominance across Battleworld now almost fragile under the silence. Reed looked like a man who had fought through nightmares to find his way back, bruised, grimy, but still upright. They didn't trade fists, they traded philosophies. Doom explained how he had saved what was left of reality, how he had stolen the power of the Beyonders and built Battleworld from dust and shards and willpower alone. He believed he had done what Reed couldn't, because Reed had hesitated, and in Doom's perspective, Reed had failed. But Reed didn't flinch. He said Doom didn't build a paradise. He built a throne out of bones and secrets, ruling by fear, not hope. And worst of all, he pretended he was the only one who could. That's when Molecule Man leaned in. Not physically, but metaphysically, which is how cosmic beings eavesdrop when reality itself is the walls. And he picked a side. Not because Reed was stronger, not because Reed had a better plan, but because Reed was kind. Because when they were both trapped in that pocket of not quite existence, Reed had treated Molecule Man like a person, not a tool. And for a being who'd been used by Doom like a cosmic wrench, that mattered. So Molecule Man gave Reed the power. All of it. The raw, pulsing, unfiltered energy that had once belonged to the Beyonders. And Doom, to his eternal credit, didn't fight it. He looked at Reed, paused, and said the words that broke every rule in the Doom playbook. He admitted that Reed would have made a better god. No lightning strikes, no explosion, just the truth. For a man whose whole identity had been forged in fire, ego, and defiance, it was the most human thing he'd ever done. And then Reed used the power. He didn't crown himself king, and he didn't try to rebuild Battleworld. He remade everything. Not in his image, but in the image of what had been lost. He reshaped the multiverse, not to be worshipped, but to give it a chance. New Earths were born, old ones restored. Continuity got a soft reset with emotional depth. And Doom? He was given a gift. Not punishment, not death. He got to be human again. No armor, no throne, just a face. His own face with the scars gone. However, the guilt remained. But in that moment, Victor Von Doom walked away with something he had never known how to ask for: a second chance. And Reed Richards, now the closest thing to a multiversal gardener, didn't linger. He left the throne room and the power behind, took his family, and went to explore. Because for Reed, the greatest act wasn't saving the world. It was creating one where others could thrive without him. And as the stars blinked back into place, as the threads of the multiverse rewove themselves into something less broken, less doomed, and maybe just a little more hopeful, something else quietly stirred. In a different corner of reality, one not remade by Reed's hand, one that still carried a few scraps of doom and madness, a sandwich waited, and so did Miles Morales. Once the dust of Battleworld finally settled and the screaming of collapsing dimensions gave way to something closer to a heartbeat, the world, or rather, worlds, had to begin again. But this time, it wasn't Doom pulling the strings, or the Beyonders playing with reality like a Jenga tower on fire. It was Reed Richards and his family, now elevated to cosmic craftspeople with the infinite power of creation in their hands. Reed, Sue, Franklin, Valeria, and the rest of their crew didn't stick around for applause or monuments. They quietly stepped into the unknown edges of non-reality and began the long, weird job of rebuilding the multiverse, piece by piece, universe by universe, like cosmic librarians sorting infinite books written in exploding ink. While they reshaped existence one timeline at a time, Earth 616 returned. It wasn't identical to the one that had been erased, but it wasn't totally new either. It was Marvel's idea of a soft reset, which meant old stories still mattered, but just enough changed that you had to squint and reread your favorite runs to figure out what counted now. And in the middle of that new status quo, standing very confused but also very grateful, was Miles Morales. Somehow, Miles had been pulled into the heart of the rebirth. No longer trapped in the dying Ultimate Universe, he now existed fully and naturally in the mainline continuity. It wasn't a glitch, it wasn't a mistake. It was a cosmic act of kindness delivered by the most unlikely benefactor, Molecule Man. Before reality reset, Owen Reese had made one small, quiet gesture. He whispered into the weave of what would come next and made sure Miles got to keep his memories, his friends, and most importantly, his mother, who had died in the ultimate timeline but now lived again. When Miles woke up in the new Earth 616, he found something sitting in his backpack that hadn't been there before: a cheeseburger. No note, no explanation. Just a warm, slightly squashed reminder that gods come in many forms, and sometimes they leave you lunch as thanks for saving them from cosmic boredom. Meanwhile, Victor Von Doom awoke not on a throne or on a battlefield, but in a quiet place, far away from the eyes of kings and conquerors. His mask was gone and his face was healed. There was no applause, no army, no followers waiting, just the silence of a man no longer hiding behind power. Doom didn't speak. He simply walked away, not as a god, not as a villain, but as a man with history behind him and questions ahead. And so, the Marvel Universe lived again. Rewritten, rethreaded, reshaped, but not repaired beyond recognition. The scars of what had come before still lingered, tucked beneath panels and retcons, waiting for someone else to pull the wrong cosmic string and break the whole thing all over again. Because in a universe stitched together by story, the next collapse is never too far behind. And someone, somewhere, always hears the cracking. While Reed fixed the multiverse, one question remains unanswered. Why were the Beyonders destroying the multiverse? Before the multiverse broke apart like cheap glass under a god's heel, before Doom put on his glowing white robes and played king of cosmic scraps, someone had to figure out what was going wrong. That someone turned out to be Hank Pym, the man who once invented killer robots in his spare time and decided shrinking and growing were personality traits. In Time Runs Out storyline, the Avengers sent him on what was supposed to be a reconnaissance mission, a multiversal scan and report, just a quick look at what was triggering the cascading incursion events swallowing universes whole. But what Pym found on the other side of reality wasn't a scientific anomaly. It was divine murder. He traveled beyond the edge of everything, past the stitched fabric of known space, where he came face to face with the architects of cosmic genocide, the Beyonders. He called them the Ivory Kings, a name that carried both reverence and terror, like a warning etched into the bones of dead gods. They weren't just deleting universes, they were performing a controlled demolition of existence, brick by brick, multiverse by multiverse, as part of some unspoken, twisted experiment. To them, every universe was a variable, and the destruction was just part of their cosmic experiment. That's what made them so terrifying, not malevolence, but a complete detachment from the moral consequences of their actions. And Pym didn't just witness the end of worlds, he saw corpses of things that were never supposed to die. He found the living tribunal, the cosmic judge of all realities, lying dead like a monument knocked from its pedestal. Besides that, he saw the Celestials, those ancient, towering gods of creation, shattered into drifting pieces. He also saw eternity, infinity, order, and chaos, abstract forces that were time and space and logic, reduced to silence, and entire planes of existence had gone dark. What Pym returned with wasn't just information, it was an obituary for reality. He brought news that the multiverse wasn't sick or unstable. It was being murdered, and that the incursion events weren't random. They were side effects of the Beyonders pulling apart the structure of everything, collapsing the dominoes of creation so they could watch what happened when all the lights went out. There was no negotiation, no explanation, just raw power moving through the void with cold, surgical finality. Pym's return marked the last calm breath before the final plunge. His report became the last scientific summary before reality became myth, before the gods of Marvel turned on each other in a panic, before Doom realized that if he didn't act, everything would die screaming. Secret Wars wasn't just another Marvel event with shiny covers and obligatory crossovers. It was Marvel setting the table on fire, throwing out the table, then building a new multiverse from the ashes using spare Reed Richards, leftover Doom rage, and one perfectly timed cheeseburger. It was continuity therapy, reboot surgery, and multiversal karaoke all happening at once while the gods screamed and the mortals bled cosmic glitter. At its core, Secret Wars wasn't really about who punched who or which version of Wolverine was more stabby. It was about power, the terrifying kind, the kind that asks what happens when a man like Doom gets to be God and doesn't entirely hate it. It was about ego dressed in white robes, about Strange trying to hold together morality with duct tape, and about Reed realizing that the only way to fix everything was to let go of everything. It was about memory, the kind that hurts, the kind that gets rewritten, erased, and quietly handed back to you with no explanation other than, trust us, it's better now. It was about tacos too, because Miles Morales bringing a sandwich onto the multiverse lifeboat was somehow more powerful than 1,000 Infinity Stones. That sandwich represented hope, or maybe just hunger, but either way it ended up being a literal Easter egg that marked him as one of the few characters allowed to remember everything after the world stopped spinning. You couldn't really understand Secret Wars unless your brain had been softened by 2 a.m. anxiety and caffeinated hallucinations. Reading it during daylight hours felt wrong, like watching horror movies with the lights on. This was a story made for the half-conscious, emotionally overwhelmed parts of us, the parts that ask, why is there a zombie Marvel universe fused next to a Thor-based police state? And is Doom actually hot now? The Beyonders, those bleach-blonde chaos mannequins from outside space, ended up being plot devices in their own extinction. All that talk of logic and higher design, And they still got reverse engineered into cosmic juice for Doom's big glow-up. They deserved it, though. You can't just wander into reality, kill the cosmic furniture, and expect no one to steal your godhood. So now we sit in the aftermath. The multiverse is back with some pieces shinier and some characters happier. Others are probably hiding trauma in their alternate dimension garages. But that's the thing with Marvel. No ending really sticks since time loops like a DJ with trust issues. Universes collapse because someone sneezed in another timeline. And somewhere, maybe right now, Doom is already planning his next masterpiece, sharpening his ego like a blade and polishing that mask just in case, because power doesn't stay dormant forever. And Secret Wars, it's not over. It's just waiting to happen again.